They thought they were tossing out a nobody, but I was already running the place from the shadows. My name's Greg. I'm 42 years old. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. 6 months ago, I was just the IT guy. That's how they saw me anyway. The guy who fixed broken printers and reset passwords. The guy who kept the servers alive through weekends and outages, while everyone else got to be the hero in meetings. Nobody really looked twice at me, except when something went wrong, and even then, it was usually just to pass the blame. But here's the part no one knew. I was also the guy slowly buying the company from the inside. Quietly, strategically, and I wasn't doing it alone. But let's back up. About 2 years ago, my younger brother Jason was down on his luck. No job, no prospects, just bouncing between projects and couch surfing. I got him a position in my department, IT support assistant. I pulled a few strings, got him an interview, prepped him on what to say. I even trained him myself. I vouched for him. Stupid move. It started small. Jason making friends in departments he had no reason to be in. He was charming, slick, even. He could talk his way through anything. Next thing I knew, he was at happy hours with managers, laughing in break rooms with execs. And then, the real kicker, he got tight with Emily, the CEO's niece. From there, it was like watching someone hand him a golden ticket. Suddenly, I wasn't getting invited to planning meetings anymore. Emails started accidentally leaving me off. I'd show up to the server room and find Jason already talking to vendors, acting like he ran the place. It was subtle at first. A cold shoulder here, a missed CC there. But eventually, it got blatant. One morning, I came in and my ID badge didn't work. Had to buzz the front desk and wait 10 minutes before someone finally let me in. System glitch, they said. Right. Then came the invite to a private HR discussion. That should have tipped me off, but I went anyway because I still believed, somehow, that this was all a misunderstanding. The HR manager, Brandon, was Jason's old buddy from college. I didn't even know that until that morning. I walked into the conference room, and there they were. Brandon in a too-tight suit. Jason leaning against the table like he owned it, both of them trying not to smile. "Greg," Brandon said, giving me a nod like I was already halfway out the door. "We're letting you go." Effective immediately. I just stared at him. On what grounds? He cleared his throat, folded his hands like he'd practiced this. "There's been concern regarding your handling of company data. Repeated misuse. We've reviewed your access logs." Misuse? That was a joke. "Nothing personal," he added, like that would soften the blow. I didn't say anything. I just nodded slowly. My jaw was tight, but my face stayed neutral. I held back the smile that was already tugging at the corner of my mouth. They had no idea. No clue that for the past 18 months, I've been buying up shares, indirectly, through a holding company, through friends I trusted, through silent partners who didn't even know they were working for me. They thought they were firing the guy who fixed their Wi-Fi, but they just fired the man who actually owned the place. I stood up, slid the company badge across the table, and said, "Understood." Jason gave me a little smirk, like he'd finally won. But all I could think was, "You have no idea what's coming." Their smirks vanished when they realized that nobody they fired was now their boss. 2 days later, they threw a party. Not just a little lunch celebration or something tasteful. No, this was over the top. Streamers in company colors, balloons, catered trays lining the kitchen counter. I even saw champagne bottles in the pictures they posted. It was Jason's promotion party. Apparently, he'd been bumped up to director of IT services. My old job, with a fancier title. I wasn't invited, obviously. But that didn't mean I didn't know exactly what was happening. The best part? They thought I was long gone. Fired. Deleted. Out of the system. They had no idea that I'd already called for a private board meeting. One they couldn't cancel or stall, because I wasn't requesting it under the name Greg from IT. I was requesting it as Gregory L. Tilden, the owner of 52% of the company stock, held through a trust, filtered through an LLC, and finally under my name. The paperwork had been finalized 2 weeks before the day they canned me. The ink was dry. The meeting was scheduled for that same evening, 7 p.m. sharp. I made it 7:02, just to make a point. While they clinked glasses in the break room, I waited in the boardroom. The first text went out at exactly 7:02 p.m. Every senior executive got the same message. Urgent board summons, conference room A, immediate attendance required. Jason was probably still holding a glass of cheap champagne when his phone buzzed. "Maybe it's about your new job," Brandon must have said. That smug voice of his, probably grinning ear to ear. The party fizzled out fast. One by one, they filed into the boardroom. Jason, Brandon, Emily, all the ones who thought they'd won. I was already seated at the head of the table. Jason saw me first. His face went pale like someone had flipped a switch. He looked like he'd just swallowed a nail. Brandon came in next. He blinked like he couldn't believe it. "Greg, he said. I didn't answer. Emily arrived last, laughing about something until she saw me. Her jaw snapped shut. I waited until they all took their seats. Let's begin, I said. Then I slid a thick folder across the table toward the company's legal counsel, who was already sitting there, flipping through his own notes. He opened the folder and started reading aloud. Effective immediately, per Article 4, Section 2 of the bylaws, the majority shareholder has exercised the right to call an emergency session of the board. Gregory L. Tilden, through holdings disclosed in the attached documentation, now controls 52% of voting shares. The room went dead silent. Jason looked like someone had drained all the blood from his face. Brandon's hands were shaking. Emily tried to laugh, but it came out like a cough. You're lying, Jason said finally. The lawyer didn't even glance up. All legal and financial documentation has been verified. These records are accurate. I leaned forward slightly. I've been buying shares for the last 18 months, Jason. Quietly. You thought I was a guy with a screwdriver and a server login. But I was already building this company from the inside. Brandon tried to speak, but all he managed was, this is real. I cut in. And it's done. Jason slammed his fist on the table. You were just IT. And now I'm the reason you're sitting in that chair. The lawyer kept reading. The board will convene again in 72 hours to discuss personnel changes. Until then, all existing promotions, including Mr. Jason Tilden's, are under review. Jason's mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing. Emily just sat there, blinking hard. I stood. You had your party, I said. Now it's my turn. I walked out of that room knowing everything had shifted. Jason, Brandon, Emily, they'd thought they'd finally buried me. But I wasn't buried. I was building the coffin. Jason couldn't believe it. He'd been sure he'd won. The very next morning, I came back to the office, not as an employee, as the majority shareholder, as the man in charge. I wore the same outfit they'd last seen me in, simple button-down, sleeves rolled. No flashy suit, no power tie, just me, walking through the front doors like I never left. The receptionist looked up and nearly dropped her coffee. Morning, Dana, I said. She stammered something, nodded, then hit the intercom for Brandon's office. That was unnecessary. I already had a meeting scheduled, with all three of them. Jason, Brandon, and Emily were waiting in the small glass conference room just off the executive suite. Jason had his feet up on the table, trying to look relaxed. Emily was scrolling her phone like she wasn't bothered. Brandon stood near the window, arms crossed, tapping his finger against his sleeve. I stepped in and closed the door behind me. Jason leaned back, arms spread wide like he owned the place. Well, if it isn't the comeback kid. Brandon tried to put on his professional voice. Greg, I think we need to talk about what happened last night. Let's be reasonable. I cut him off with a folder. Before we talk, I want you to take a look at this. Brandon took it. Jason rolled his eyes. More legal crap? You made your point, Greg. You've got some shares, congrats. But let's be honest. This little stunt doesn't mean you can just fire people. I looked at him flatly. Actually, that's exactly what it means. Brandon flipped open the folder. His brow furrowed. Emily leaned in to see. Inside were printouts, emails, screenshots, system logs, proof that Jason had accessed confidential project files and forwarded them to a private Gmail account. Records showing Brandon had altered hiring reports and performance reviews. And Emily, well, Emily's name was attached to a document recommending my termination, sent before the so-called data misuse incident even happened. Jason stood up. This is a setup. No, I said calmly. This is documentation. The same kind I used to manage for the company's internal audits. Funny how useful all those nobody IT tasks turn out to be. Emily's face had gone pale. Brandon held up a hand. Okay, let's just slow down. Maybe we made mistakes. But Greg, friends don't do this. You don't nuke your whole department over office politics. Friends, I repeated, staring at him. Friends don't backstab each other. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out 3 envelopes. One for Jason, one for Brandon, one for Emily. Severance packages, I said. Effective immediately. Jason looked like I had slapped him. You're firing me? You're really firing me? I brought in new systems. I modernized the infrastructure. You copied a proposal I wrote last year and slapped your name on it. He opened his mouth to argue, but the lawyer from the boardroom walked in just then. He handed me a final sheet. Everything's signed, he said. They're officially terminated. HR will lock their credentials in the next 10 minutes. Brandon's voice cracked. You can't do this. I can, I said. And I did. Jason grabbed the envelope and ripped it open. This check. This is a joke. You can't just dump us like this. Actually, I could have terminated all 3 of you for cause with no payout, I said. But I figured I'd be civil. That's more than any of you gave me. Emily stood up slowly, still trying to hold her posture. You're making a mistake. People won't like how this looks. You'll look petty. No, I said. I'll look like a man cleaning up a mess. And by Monday, no one will remember who you even were. Jason pushed his chair back, face red and trembling. You think this is over? I smiled. I know it's not, but it is for you. Your badges are already deactivated. Security will walk you out. Brandon looked at me one last time, like he still couldn't believe it. You were just the IT guy? He said quietly. No, I replied, turning toward the door. I was the owner. You just didn't bother to look. And I walked out, leaving them to figure out what hit them. The betrayal didn't end at the boardroom. It followed me home. 3 days after I fired them, the silence broke. It started with blocked calls. I'd answer, and there'd be nothing but breathing on the other end. Then came the texts. Most were anonymous. Burner numbers, probably. You'll regret this. Fraud always comes back around. Your time's coming. I ignored them. I figured it was Jason and Brandon blowing off steam. They were humiliated, jobless, probably angry that no one was lining up to rescue them. I expected some noise. I didn't expect what came next. It was a Thursday night. I'd worked late, catching up on vendor contracts and meeting with legal. I stopped by the corner Thai place near my condo, picked up dinner, and didn't get home until almost 9:30. When I stepped into my unit, something felt off. The air was wrong. Still, but not calm. Like the kind of quiet you get when someone's just left a room. Then I saw it. My laptop was open on the kitchen table. I never leave it like that. And the screen, unlocked. Someone had been in here. I dropped the food and scanned the place. Bedroom door open. Closet door cracked. My dresser drawer, a drawer I always kept shut, slightly ajar. I grabbed the small security remote from the key hook and hit the footage replay on the monitor by the door. My building had a decent setup, and I'd installed my own system too, just in case. There it was, time-stamped at 7:42 p.m. A door beep, someone swiping a keycard, someone entering. I leaned closer. The camera wasn't perfect, but it caught enough. A shadowy figure stepped in wearing a hoodie pulled low and gloves. No face, no clear features. But the access record told me everything. That keycard ID? It hadn't been mine. It had been deactivated 3 weeks ago. Jason's. I froze. I'd ordered every terminated employee's credentials wiped. But security had confirmed. 2 cards hadn't been returned. Jason's and Brandon's. I figured they'd try something petty. Maybe sneak into the office, grab personal items. Not this. Not my home. I sat down and checked the laptop's activity log. Someone had plugged in a flash drive. Tried to run recovery software. Failed. Then accessed my private folder. What they didn't know? My actual files weren't on that laptop. Everything important was remote encrypted and double mirrored to a secure server. Still, just knowing they'd tried, I should have been scared. I should have called the police. Instead, I felt something else. A cold, sharp clarity. Jason and Brandon were desperate. They didn't just want revenge, they needed it. Their careers were in flames. Emily had already vanished from LinkedIn, gone dark on social. But Jason still thought he could claw his way back. And Brandon? He'd always been the opportunist. He probably saw this as a last-ditch Hail Mary to shake something loose, dig up dirt, find a way to smear me. They weren't done, not even close. The next morning, I met with our corporate legal team. I gave them everything, security footage, access logs, a full timeline. Then I contacted building management, had all keycard systems scrubbed, new locks installed. I changed every password, every device, every access point, and I made a note to myself. Don't just protect the company, protect everything. Because if they were willing to walk into my home, then there were no lines they wouldn't cross. But they didn't know me like they thought they did. They thought I was the quiet guy behind the desk. What they didn't know was, I'd been waiting for a fight. And no, I wasn't playing defense anymore. Their empire crumbled, but they still thought I was the cause. About a week after the break-in, I started hearing things. At first, it was just background noise, conversations from ex-colleagues still on the inside. A few whispered texts from people who'd always stayed neutral. Then I got the full picture. Jason had tried to launch his own tech startup. He called it Novastack. Clean name, flashy branding. The kind of site that had a countdown to a non-existent product launch and pictures of people in blazers standing in front of whiteboards. The kicker? He was using stolen internal documentation from our company. Old architecture diagrams, process flows, even parts of a proposal I'd written last year under a pseudonym. Someone who'd seen his pitch deck said it looked eerily familiar, almost copy-pasted. It might have worked. He's not a dumb guy. Arrogant, yes, but not dumb. And if no one had looked too closely, maybe he could have raised a little money. But someone did look closely. A junior analyst at a VC firm flagged the document metadata. My name was still buried in it. And just like that, investors backed off, not with drama, not with confrontation, just polite, cold radio silence. Jason was blacklisted overnight. Word got around fast in our circles. No one wants to fund a guy with a scandal hanging over his head. And once the data misuse rumors from the HR records came out, he was done. Not officially, not legally, just done. Even the desperate investors wouldn't touch him. Then there was Brandon. He'd been working the phones, trying to land somewhere fast. I know he interviewed with 2 competitors, even offered to take a pay cut. But people talk. And unfortunately for Brandon, his reputation had caught up with him too. One of the VPs at a mid-sized firm he pitched told me, if this is the guy who tried to undermine his own department head, I'm not letting him anywhere near mine. The irony? They thought I'd leaked it. They blamed me for everything, like I had orchestrated their downfall, like I made one call and shut the doors on their futures. But I hadn't said a word, not to anyone, not publicly, not privately. I didn't need to. They destroyed themselves. Jason's startup burned before it got off the runway. Brandon's job hunt, dead on arrival. And Emily? Gone. Vanished from every platform. Someone said she went back to Connecticut, some family property upstate. No forwarding address. But even then, I could tell none of them saw it that way. In their eyes, it was still my fault. They never asked why I stayed quiet, why I didn't retaliate publicly, why I didn't air their mistakes to the world. Because they never understood who I was to begin with. They fired the guy they thought was beneath them. And now they were jobless, blacklisted, bitter, and still convinced the nobody from IT had gotten lucky. But luck had nothing to do with it. I didn't ruin them. They just underestimated the wrong man. Jason thought he had a final trump card. He didn't. The annual shareholder meeting was supposed to be a victory lap. For the first time in over a decade, the company's quarterly report showed double-digit growth across every division. We'd landed 2 new contracts with international vendors, our infrastructure was stable, and employee turnover had dropped like a stone since I'd cleaned house. I walked into that conference hall feeling solid, confident. The board was smiling, the numbers were glowing on every slide, and the questions from investors were polite and optimistic. Then came the last 10 minutes. The room had just settled after our CFO wrapped her presentation. I stood, ready to deliver the closing remarks, when the doors in the back opened hard enough to bang. Jason, in a wrinkled gray blazer and khakis, holding a fat folder like it was a torch. I should have known he'd try something loud. The room went dead quiet as he walked down the center aisle, each step like he was building toward a grand reveal. This meeting isn't valid, he shouted, voice echoing off the walls. This man, Greg Tilden, is a fraud. Murmurs. Confused whispers. Greg used stolen software to gain control of this company, he went on. He funneled purchases through fake shell companies to inflate his share count. He doesn't legally own this place. He dropped the folder onto the table in front of me. Pages spilled out. Charts. Diagrams. Annotated nonsense, if you knew what you were looking at. But that wasn't the point. The point was the spectacle. One of the investors, an older guy with a bow tie and sharp eyes, spoke first. This is a serious allegation, Mr. Tilden. I stepped forward, completely calm. Funny you brought that up, Jason, I said, because I brought something too. I pulled out a small USB stick and handed it to the tech at the projector. A few clicks later, the speakers came alive with a recording. Jason's voice, clear as day. Just leak the fake file. It'll ruin him. Doesn't matter if it's real. Gasps. The kind that ripple through a room like cold wind. Then another clip. He's too clean. We'll never get him on something real. We just need people to start asking questions. Jason froze. His mouth opened, then shut. No words came out. I looked at the crowd. Jason tried to frame me. He falsified documents, hacked old company records, and tried to smear my name because he couldn't beat me any other way. An investor in the second row leaned back, arms crossed. That audio authenticated, time-stamped and verified by our legal team and a third-party forensics lab, I said. Jason tried to grab the folder, like he could undo it if he just yanked back the papers. Security stepped in before he got close. As they escorted him out, he looked back at me, eyes wild. You think this is over? He hissed. I didn't even flinch. It was over the minute you thought I wouldn't be ready. The doors slammed shut behind him. I turned back to the crowd, adjusted the mic, and said, now, where were we? Ah, yes, forecasting Q4. And just like that, I buried the last real threat to my name in front of everyone who ever mattered. Even after beating everyone else, I had one last ghost to bury. I thought it was done. Jason was out. Brandon was gone, and Emily had disappeared into wherever people go when they've been publicly humiliated. For the first time in years, things were quiet. Then the letter showed up. No return address. Just my name, and the company's main office printed neatly on the envelope. Inside, a single cardstock sheet, for words, written in ink. We know everything. D. There was a second note taped to the back. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Warehouse 17. Come alone. I stared at the signature for a long time. D. I only knew one person who signed letters that way. Daniel Carter. 15 years ago, he was my partner. Not legally, not on paper. But we built our first venture together out of an abandoned print shop and a couple of laptops. Daniel was the ideas guy, the networker, the one who could talk his way into or out of anything. Until he disappeared. There had been a car crash, supposedly fatal. They never found the body, but the wreckage was enough. I'd mourned him, grieved the loss of a brother. Then I buried myself in work and built everything we'd dreamed of without him. And now he was back. Warehouse 17 was off a dead-end industrial road on the south side of town. Empty, cold, half the lights flickering. He was already waiting inside when I got there. Same cocky stance, same smile that looked like a dare. "Greg," he said, stepping out from the shadows. "You're looking good, like a man who got everything he wanted." I didn't move. "You faked your death." He shrugged. "People like us don't get to retire." Disappearing was the only way out. I let the silence hang. "What do you want, Daniel?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a small black binder, tossed it onto the metal table between us. "I own 49% of your shell company," he said. "The one you used to quietly buy out those shares. You didn't clean it properly." I left myself a backdoor. I didn't look at the binder. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" He leaned forward. "You either cut me in now, or I go public. Your empire, Greg, it'll fall. One press release, and everyone finds out your majority stake was built on stolen structure." He thought he had me. You could see it in his eyes. But what he didn't know, I'd already sealed every crack. I had tracked the account 6 months ago when I first got suspicious. I found the leftover shares, bought them out, had them reassigned, buried the trail deep. I reached into my coat, pulled out a printed page, and slid it across the table. "Check the date on that transaction," I said. "You sold your stake last year, to an entity I now own." Daniel scanned the page. His face changed, not all at once, but in degrees, from confidence to confusion to that subtle, bitter twitch at the corner of his mouth. "You planned this," he muttered. "I finished this," I replied. He stood there, fingers still on the page like he couldn't let go. "You always were the quiet one," he said, "but you learned how to kill clean." I turned toward the exit. "Goodbye, Daniel." He didn't follow. He didn't speak. He just stood there while I walked out of that warehouse, the final chapter already closed. Outside, security was waiting. I told them to give me 10 minutes. That was all I needed. They escorted Daniel to the edge of the lot, told him he was trespassing, told him not to come back. He didn't resist. He just smiled once, tight, empty, and walked into the dark. That night, I didn't go home. I went back to the office, sat in my chair, and stared at the sign above my desk, the one I'd had framed after the board meeting. They fired me, but I owned everything they worked for. And now, I added a new line underneath. And when the ghost came back, I buried him too. Greg's revenge was done, and he did it without fanfare. The morning after the warehouse meeting, I came in early, just past 6. The office was still quiet, sun barely peeking through the blinds, the only sounds coming from the cleaning crew finishing up. I sat at my desk and looked around. Same desk, same room, but everything felt different now. Jason, Brandon, Emily, Daniel, they were all gone, cut off, exposed, or buried. There was no one left trying to rip what I'd built out from under me. And this time, I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I opened a small box from the bottom drawer, one I'd been holding on to for months. Inside was the sign I had custom-made the day after the board meeting, when the dust was still settling. It read, "They fired me, but I owned everything they worked for." I pulled a hammer and a nail from the drawer, walked over to the wall behind my desk, and hung it up, dead center. Then I added the second plaque underneath it, the one I finished last night after the warehouse. And when the ghost came back, I buried him too. Clean, subtle, permanent. I sat back and stared at it for a long time. Not because I needed a reminder, but because I wanted to mark the moment. For once, there was no one breathing down my neck. No more threats hiding behind smiles. Just silence, peace. Then I did one final thing. I opened the system admin portal and reset every access code, every key card in the building, even mine. I reissued them from scratch. New rules, new protocol, no more skeletons, no more backdoors. The old guard was gone. I left nothing to chance. By 9 o'clock, the office was alive again. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking. My assistant brought in coffee, dropped off the morning reports. "You sleep at all?" she asked, half joking. I smiled. "Enough." She paused, glancing up at the wall behind me. "That new plaque's intense." "It's honest," I said. She nodded. Well, glad you're still here. I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't just still here. I'd won. Quietly. Completely. No press releases. No revenge speeches. No dramatic exits. Just locked doors and silence. No more Jason. No more Brandon. No more Daniel. Just me, the company, and a security system no one else could touch. I leaned back in my chair, sipped my coffee, and looked out the window. Let them wonder what happened. Let them lie about how it ended. I knew the truth, and the truth was simple. They buried me, but I was already underneath them, holding the shovel.